watching the stream there for a second. He might do. He's not far behind. It's only one lap down at the minute. The repair time on the BMW, not very long though, so
Just swapped a whole new front on that car and going out again.
Yeah, just popped into view.
I think it was Road Atlanta where... Oh no, it was Daytona. I'm not quite sure. There was a race in IMSA at some point. Of course, in Daytona, lower class, what you would nowadays call GT3, but back then it was GT something, won the overall race.
Yeah.
So that was already like kind of an interesting thing. But I think it was at the Petit Le Mans where a 911 GTE in the early 2010s or mid 2010s nearly won the race overall as well.
Yeah.
So
I like the GTEs.
Yeah, they were absolutely beautiful cars.
I know the GT3s have taken over definitely popularity and are becoming
cost effectiveness.
Yeah, and the car class that is now ubiquitous in virtually every series. And rightly so, because they're a lot easier to drive for the so-called gentleman drivers. But I did like the GTEs.
I mean, GTEs are probably some of my favorite race cars of all times. Especially the, let's say, later era of cars like this C7 and Freud 8. Oh, and Genie is round again. Bit of surprise. But those cars I absolutely adore. I also really, really like the GT3 variants, but of course they're not as brutal, simply said, as the GTEs.
No.
However, of course, if you look at it, it's much more reasonable to use GT3s instead. Anyway, I mean, they're, I think, half the price or 2/3 of the price of a GTE. Much more accessible, as you said, easier to drive for gentleman drivers, but I don't think that this is really the big talking point in the end. It's about cost effectiveness. You can buy a GT3 and you can enter it in IMSA, you can enter it in the WEC, in the thousands of GT3 racing series around the world.
Yeah.
There are so many ways you can do with that single car in theory that is just much more cost effective. It's the same reason why we have the GTP and LMDH cars being the same nowadays. Yes. I mean, they used to split them. Of course, if you think back, I think 3 years ago was the last time with the DPI cars, which also was great. I really liked them, but of course it's much more effective if you can use a very similar car in both series.
Yeah, the DPIs, and then they started developing DPI2, and then you got the LMDH cars, which was Le Mans, Daytona, Hypercar, and then now the actual like Hypercar, as they call it now, which is essentially the same set of regulations across both the IMSA racing and the WEC racing, so it makes it a lot more cost effective for the teams. It means that the fields are a lot bigger in both series. It makes a lot of sense.
Indeed, the sound of the Porsche 911 RSR was very, very good.
It was.
Fun fact, the Porsche 911 RSR is also the only, and it's not quite the only, but pretty much, for me at least, the only 911 with mid-engine. The only other one being the 911 GT1 of the 90s. Yeah. But I mean, if you look at it, you wouldn't really say, oh, that's a 911. I'd say.
No. It was a 911 in name.
I mean, technically the RSR also isn't one then, but
yeah,
I'd still go with that one being an actual 911. And why did they put it into the middle? Not because it's necessarily better, but because they wanted a bigger diffuser.
But it is better.
Well,
I love you, Porsche, but you put engines in strange places.
It actually makes perfect sense to put it on the rear axle. Depending, of course, of what you want with the car. But if you perfect the system like Porsche does, I mean, the success of Porsche is pretty undeniable, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But they do spend an awful lot of development money trying to get it to drive like a mid-engine car. When they could just put the engine in the middle.
Nah. All jokes aside, it's great to have those different concepts.
It is, yeah. And it's brilliant for us in sim racing to be able to feel the difference between the front engine, the mid and the rear. And you can tell when you're driving it. You can feel where the weight is and how it reacts. And it gives us a reason to pick one car over another besides what it looks like. Although what it's looked like is blatantly the most important.
Yeah, I mean, it's what most people pick their car for. I mean, in all honesty, when we were a bit younger, growing up with older games, in our case.
In your case.
Well, yeah.
In my case, what you consider an old game is still a new.
Fair point. But, however, of course, you went by what cars you like in terms of how they look, not how good they actually drove.
Oh, for sure.
You just noticed afterwards if you made a good decision or not.
The what is your first car in Gran Turismo was never about what it performs like.
Yeah, and that is very, very true. I grew up with Gran Turismo 4. It's a game I still love to this day, but that used car dealership, you could spend hours in there just to find a car that you really like for the starting money and then just go with it for most of the game.
Yeah, it was a fun game to play, but not really what I'm into anymore as far as racing games is concerned. But yeah, like some of the mods and tuning you could do on your car was pretty insane by the end of it.
Fair point, as Jonas Bloom passes Fenris. This is actually on track right now. So Jonas Bloom up into third. Oh, and going very right.
Lino, you did it again.
I should stop talking.
There's some pretty crazy bouncing by the hypercar there as they come through like the snake section and over the top of what in the GT3 is a pretty killer, can be a pretty killer curve in a hypercar. Just need to send it bouncing all over the track.
Yeah, I mean, everything you feel in the GT3, you feel in the hypercar but amplified. More so on the braking zones. Even though once you lock up, you don't really feel anything, of course.
These cars are a little more planted than some of the others in RENNSPORT, though. And hopefully we won't have some of the... Like if you'd race around here in touring cars, for example, you may find a car on its roof, which hopefully you won't see with a hypercar.
It is much more unlikely. Even though there are many places in the world where I've seen touring cars nearly flip over or flip over. But of course, those curbs are in Genius, a lot of jumping. Of course, this is a bit amplified on the broadcast. But yeah, I mean, Road Atlanta being one of the prime examples of touring cars being able to flip over on those high curbs. You won't see that on a place like Spa if it's pretty flat. Even though the bus stop can be nasty, but you're not fast enough there to really flip your car over.
Yeah, you need to get the weight transferred right onto the outside wheels and then just smack a big curb and on the de-weighted inside wheels, it can kind of send you into the stratosphere.
Just having a think where we have other very high raised curbs for the touring cars to be very cautious with. I mean, if you take Monza into account, in the second chicane you can flip pretty much every car if you decide to just go straight, which you definitely shouldn't. You will definitely not be happy afterwards, because those sausage curbs can really launch you in the air. And I mean, that has been a big talking point, I think 4 years ago, with many sausage curb related incidents and across various motorsports.
Yeah, there was a case of a GT3 at Monza a couple of years ago. It was an Aston Martin where they went over a sausage curb and the door came off.
Yeah, I mean, and it flipped on its roof. So I think that was
afterwards, but the door came off before then.
fair one. I mean, we've also seen the F3 and F4 instances.
Yeah.
They are fairly dangerous if put in the wrong places. I remember at the Lausitzring, they used to have those dish curbs. Before sausage curbs were more common, let's say, they're dish curbs, which were round and kind of raised in the middle.
Okay.
Which acted the same way when you hit them, but no matter from which point you hit them, if it was like sideways or straight, you will always get launched in the air.
Yeah.
And they removed them, I think, in 2012 or 13, because an F3 car launched into the air a couple of meters.
Oh.
At not so fast speeds. You can take that corner at about 90 kph, I think, where they were installed. And still, it was just ridiculous how much the cars got launched up.
Yeah, there's some safety features which seem like a good idea on paper, but when put into practice, it actually end up reducing the safety, which obviously not great.
I mean, look at this track. If you take a look around the track, you have a fence, you have tire barriers, but apart from that, well, you have some curbs. And still, I'm not sure when we've seen the last big crash at Road Atlanta, and it's say more crash heavy than other tracks due to its nature. It's very bumpy, it's tight, it's compact. Of course, you're gonna have more instances per kilometer, let's say, than on Le Mans, where 80% of the track is straight.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, if you know what you're doing, you don't even have a catch fence back there.
Well, there's plenty of real estate. There's plenty of grass off the track for you to try and do something. Although in a lot of these cars, you are kind of a passenger once you hit the grass.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's the same thing like on the Nordschleife, that the walls are quite close to the track. So even if you go on the grass, the wall isn't too far away.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is... a very famous man once said, it's not the speed that kills you, it's the sudden stop at the end.
Yeah.
And I mean, that pretty much applies here in every way. I think turn 1 is by far the most dangerous, because it's the only place on the track where you can really hit a wall straight on if you get unlucky.
Yeah. Yeah, as we saw Mo and Bermuda do a couple about 30 minutes ago.
Very much, unfortunately.
That very strange.
Even though he still kind of was lucky with getting tipped into a spin before. Not sure if you could say it was lucky, but it could have been much worse.
It could have been, yeah. At least he could drive afterwards. 79-ish laps of this race to go. So that puts the halfway point at roughly, 40, 39. So we've got a little bit to go before we're halfway through here. We've got Ginez and Dominic Ladler both took on a lot of fuel at the beginning of the race. So I think they're hoping to go for the rest of the distance on what they've got left in the tank. Mura is pretty much the same. The only one who with a different fuel load is Johannes Blum.
I think the HyperX will have to come in nonetheless once more. I don't think that one full tank will last them too long, doesn't it?
Ginez and Ladler came in at rough. They were about a lap between them, weren't they, when they came in?
Yeah.
And they both completely filled their tanks up, and they've got about the same amount left right now.
Okay, that is very interesting, of course. What we don't have, of course, is the virtual energy, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's true.
So these guys don't have to obey to any rules on how long they're allowed to go. They can just go what the physical fluid in their tanks allows them to go.
Yeah, they can pump up the regen and just see how long they can go for. On a track like this, you've got a couple of fairly big braking zones, I can imagine they get quite a lot of regen back from those.
It's also a very interesting thing to play with. You can increase and decrease energy regen if you have the buttons assigned for it. And I never could really get my head around how to use it most effective. Of course, you want to have the most regen in the corner and so on, most power on the straight. Yeah. But if you want to be energy efficient, maybe you want to lift and coast a bit. I know how to fuel save, but I have no idea how to scavenge energy. That's what I'm trying to say. But is it just me, or is Gina's car crabbing a tiny bit?
I don't know. He's maybe getting a bit squirrely coming into the corner there, but he seems okay from what I can see.
Maybe it was just an illusion, but it seems like the rear left is pointing not quite in the direction it should.
He's holding the steering wheel pretty much straight when he's going down a straight, so it can't be too far off if it is.
Yeah. I mean, where's Rhode Island are really straight anyway, so.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, you can change regen and deployment separately in the LMDH cars, which can lead to some interesting things for you to mess around with. And if you're one of those crazy aliens with brain power to spare, you can even change the regen and the deployment at multiple points in a lap and try and optimize that. I'm too stupid, so I just set it so that I'm not gaining or losing too much each lap and just leave it alone.
And for qualifying, you ramp it up. That's pretty much how it goes.
Yep.
Are they again doing fireworks?
They are, yeah. Obviously, they've realised that there's a community event going on and people have decided to sell off some fireworks in celebration.
That's a fair point. Maybe they're celebrating halfway through this race after 49 minutes and 18 seconds of racing.
That's probably it.
Oh, and Genies. Again.
Oh.
I mean, he made it a very nice 360.
He did, yeah.
But it still doesn't help his tire life in any form.
No.
It's like this odd mistake here and there. Apart from that, he's doing a mega job. But it's like sometimes just...
He's staying very consistent, isn't he? He's got the occasional hiccup here and there, but you kind of expect that in hypercar drives, to be honest. To a degree, at least. You've got to be fairly robotic to not getting an incident. There's a reason only professional drivers racing in real life.
Very much so. It's also crazy to see how international this race is. I mean, of course we always had a good variation in terms of who raced in the races, but Gini is from Argentina, Dominic Lala of course from Austria. Johannes Blüm from Germany, Moura from Brazil. And from the drivers who unfortunately DNF, we still have Belgium represented, Portugal, France, and the USA.
Nice. A bit sad to see the USA driver having to skip out of a Road Atlanta race. Maybe it's because we don't have some kind of like Stars and Stripes freedom livery. Which all the manufacturers are happy to sport every now and again in one of the American races.
Dominic Lala still showing off his consistency. But Dominic Lala again, pretty much without any mistake here, right?
Yeah, he's being fairly clockwork with his laps. He's just been pounding them out, keeping them clean. And it's paying off for him, obviously. He's doing pretty well. Even before we had the DNFs at the beginning, he seemed to be working his way. Well, he was started pretty much near the front, but keeping it there and keeping out of trouble. He was very good at keeping away from the other cars that were making mistakes.
It was a fairly promising start. I mean, if we think about the fight with Lala, Benauda, and Reguibi,
Yeah,
that
for
was
sure.
on a pretty high level.
It was a good start to the big race, and I was looking forward to a bit more of that battling continuing. Obviously, with a longer race like this, it can't happen all the time. It doesn't even happen all the time in a 60-minute sprint race. But yeah, it's always good when you have the pit stop shaking things up and moving people around on track position at least, and seeing how drivers deal with that.
I wonder what could have been if Reguibi decided just wait a few seconds and not rejoin just in front of Joachim Thunder. I mean, Joachim Thunder would have moved up the field quite significantly at this point.
Yeah.
And he would have would have been in the fight for P3 at the very least. And I mean, we can only hope that this is giving him a learning lesson. Who knows? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
After all, he was still a rookie to the official events. But yeah, I mean, Dominic Lala is the prime example that being cautious and, well, not too aggressive with where you want to gain the time.
Yeah.
Can give you good race without. I mean, so is Joachim Thunder.
You've got to keep an eye out for those yellow flags and make sure that when they're up, you don't just go barreling through. Make sure you've got eyes on the incident that's going on and you can take action appropriately. You can't, even in professional racing, they can't take it for granted that anybody who spins off is going to do the right thing.
Very much so. I mean, sometimes you just unfortunately can't really avoid it.
No, there are times where it's inevitable and it's going to happen. But there are, it's also clear that when you get certain drivers which seem to be able to manage that kind of thing better than others, and I think a lot of blame gets put on the, shall we say, lower skilled or erratic drivers for causing problems, and I think not 100% of it, but some of it can go towards the quicker person coming through as well. There are things you can do to make sure you negotiate those incidents safely.
Could also say there are always two people to an incident.
Yes, that would have been a lot shorter.
Would have, could have, should have.
Yeah. But yeah, there's always something you can learn from an incident, whether it was your fault, whether it wasn't your fault. I think having a quick look at your incident and saying, "Oh, if I'd done that there, this could have been maybe avoided." It would have given me a bit more time to assess what was going on. Sometimes somebody just does something crazy, and then you become a passenger in your own game.
I think Facundo Gines currently is leading this race from lights to this point right now.
Yeah, he had a good start, and I don't think he's ever not been in the lead, even after that pretty massive smash with his front end coming off. He still got out before Dominic Ladler made the laps back on him.
So right now we're looking at a race length of about 1 hour 40, since we crossed the halfway point at 49 minutes.
So that's about 45 minutes left to go, so I think Gines is going to have enough fuel in his tank. He might want to stop for tyres, I don't know.
Who knows, maybe fastest lap is still in his sight. I mean, of course, the laps you do right here also count towards a global leaderboard, so you have two kinds of leaderboards. The time trials, which of course you can access through the game, through time trials, select car and track, and you're ready to go. But there's also, what I find very nice to look up, a leaderboard for lap times set in races, qualifying, and all that kind of stuff, because fuel loads, tire status, and all that is very different to time trials, where you have a fixed tires, fixed fuel, and all that kind of stuff. And therefore,
and you get everyone participating in it as well, even if they don't know. It takes into account everyone's times.
Very much so, and I mean, the lap times can be even crazier and quicker due to the lower fuel loads. So I really enjoy taking a look at it. I mean, it's also fairly easy to access if you just go in the app to contests and then leaderboards.
Yep.
And you can look track records to official.
In game, it's in my RENNSPORT and then leaderboards.
Maybe you can just take a look at what the current best lap times in hypercars are, and it seems a 108.9 by Höchfeld.
Ooh.
If we take a look at Gines' best lap time, a 109.671 is putting him in third on the leaderboard.
Nice. The other good thing with the leaderboards is you can do it by car class, which you can't do in the time trial ones. So you can see who's got the best GT3 lap around a track or the best hypercar lap around a track. Whereas the time trial leaderboards go straight down to car.
Genie is now on the back of Moore. Being a bit indecisive where to go. I mean, if you see a car sliding in front of you, you don't really know, is he trying to go to the right or is he trying to go to the outside but just has an oversteer moment? It's always a bit hard to judge.
Yeah, the Audi being a bit slidey, it can be a bit tricky to judge where it's going. But Gines seems to have got the hang of it by now, and he's obviously built up some trust with the people on track, which goes a long way, I think, for once you understand that someone's going to be decisive and make the move, it can be a lot easier to predict what they're going to do and give them the space they need to do it.
And just listening to the cars. A bit of a slide there for Facundo Ginés, giving it a bit of gas and then kicking the rear end out. Also fairly interesting to watch in a hypercar. You wouldn't expect the hypercars to behave like that, but they actually do.
They have a lot of power, don't they?
Yeah, and they're also very twitchy, which makes me like them even more. I mean, the era of Formula One that I have most fond memories of, and that I like the most to this day is like the early 2010s. So those narrow, and Bloom going off there in the background. There's luckily a gap in the wall that you can go through. Seems to be only minor damage to the front right rear fender. But coming back to what I said, even though it seems like the suspension is very bent on that Porsche, as I'm seeing it on your screen right now.
Yeah, he's a bit right hand down, as they say.
But yeah, the era I most prefer, let's say, is like the early 2010s. And I mean, those cars, they were so incredibly twitchy. Like, they moved around like crazy. And I absolutely love it. They looked fast. And that's the thing, I think, what also many, well, modern, I wouldn't say all motorsports, but especially Formula 1 and Formula 2, they look too smooth. They are super hard to drive. But people go like, oh, they are super easy to drive because they look easy to drive from the outside. They are so smooth. Of course, the drivers are also so smooth.
Yeah.
But those twitchy cars, they looked fast. They looked dangerous in a way and made it even more appealing. And with those hypercars nowadays, they are also very aggressive and yeah, very twitchy.
There's quite a good video on YouTube right now of a Red Bull video of the RB1 and the RB21 on track at the same time. David Coulthard driving his RB1 from 20 years ago, obviously, and Max Verstappen in the RB21. And just the size difference between the two cars is pretty massive. The new car is so long compared to the old one.
Yeah, I mean, the hypercars as well, but they typically race on circuits that work with those sizes. Even though I was always surprised at how small the predecessor cars, so LMP1 or LMP 900s, even more from the early 2000s, how small they were actually. Like, you take a look at them on their own, and they look kind of big in terms of their proportions, and then you put them next to a GT3 car, and they're like, oh, I have to look down actually. And I'm only 176.
One thing I'd heard about the development of the hypercar rules was that it brought them more in line with the Formula One rules as a kind of technical specification thing. A lot of the components between the two are similar. So I think it was started as not just to be a hypercar, to be a car in itself, but also as a manufacturing stepping stone up to F1.
I mean, would explain the big spike in manufacturer interest in Formula 1 in recent days. But yeah, of course. I mean, when they tried it the other way around in the late 90s, it killed off Group C. Which was a big shame, but nowadays it seems to work fine. I mean, in general, like, the connection between all the different racing series is extremely strong.
Except for in the sad cases like Audi leaving GT3 so they can concentrate on F1.
And also aborting their hypercar project. Imagine you had the likes of Porsche and BMW in the hypercar class and then also Audi joining in.
Yeah.
It's basically the DTM renaissance.
Of course you'd go straight to DTM.
Have to.
But the hypercar class has definitely been revitalized. Well, with it becoming the hypercar class, it's definitely revitalized the top end prototype racing. There's been a lot more cars in it. The fields have been getting bigger and bigger, and you're seeing so many more manufacturers in it now than what you used to.
You know what I'd even say? I'd say currently we have the best endurance car class of all time in motorsports history.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people will point to Group C and maybe the early LMP days and all that kind of stuff. And it had great stories. It was a great time, of course. But it was never this competitive. I mean, everybody knows this Nobody's Perfect poster from Porsche, which is absolutely awesome, by the way. But it just shows Porsche was the car at that time.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you have Porsche fighting for win. You had BMW winning at IndyCar recently. You have Cadillac always being up front in the WCF, Toyota and Ferrari fighting up front. And even, I wouldn't want to say further down, but in that class is also the likes of Alpine, Peugeot, Lamborghini. We had the Isotta Fraschini, which unfortunately can't continue at the moment. But there's just so much variety in there. And everybody can win, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's the great thing. People moan about BOP and stuff, but I think it works fine.
And you get some crazy designs like the Peugeot without the rear wing and things like that. Lets people mess around and try new things, which is always good, I think, for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, the cars are very distinguishable, which is quite crazy for a hypercar or a more prototype spec car.
And we were talking earlier on about the Porsche versus the BMW engine sound-wise, and then you've got the Cadillac thrown in there for good measure as well. That's a pretty fantastic sounding car.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I said it before in the live stream, I love American V8s. But that is a whole nother level as well.
There's something kind of fun about the hypercars because anyone who's not driven one, they start on the electric and then it bump starts the ICE motor as you're going down the pit lane. And there's something great about just having this little electric whine in the background, and then it shows boom. It's a great feeling every time you do it.
It's brutal. It pretty much is. But what we also could see on the straight very well was the headlights of Facundo Ginés just turning on because it's getting a bit darker. So we are getting closer to the afternoon section of this race.
Yeah, the in-game time is 7:10 right now.
We will have sundown at roughly 8 p.m. in-game. 8 to 8:30 p.m. You can see already the shadows getting a bit longer.
Johannes Bloom just having another little off, but he's getting my Trooper of the Race award, I think, for just carrying on. I said in yesterday's cast that I'm always grateful when somebody just carries on until the end, and he's doing really well for that. I tip my hat to you, sir.
Bit of a mess there between Ginés and Lala. While they were trying to lap, because Lala was trying to give Ginés the space to go through. Ginés initially didn't want to go. It's always a lot about the communication between the classes. But even with communication, it's if you are meeting each other at the wrong spot, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
That's why usually you go, okay, the GT3s stick to the line, or the lower class cars stick to their line, and the faster cars have to find the way through.
It's the general rule of thumb for blue flags in GT racing, isn't it? the slower class stick to your line, the fast car has to find a way through. But there's a certain amount of
respect.
Yeah, both people are involved there, and sometimes it's worth just getting out of the way and dropping off the throttle for a second.
I mean, it's also a lot about being predictable for the other driver. If you're in a hypercar, an LMP2, for example, which is also, of course, in the GT, you are much faster than the GT3. You can find your way through on the outside, everywhere on the straight. But you need to know where you can go. And if you have a GT3 trying to leave you space by going to the outside, but you want to go through the outside to pass normally, let's say, yeah, you're gonna crash. Like,
yeah. And the LMP2s were even quicker than some of the hypercars at certain points in Le Mans, so it's not a clear-cut thing.
Yeah, definitely isn't. So, of course, if you want to be predictable, you should do what everybody does and stick to the racing line. Because that is the one thing that pretty much everybody does the same. Of course, sometimes you're a bit more to the outside, a bit more to the inside, brake a bit later, a bit earlier. But not as much as you can't anticipate it.
Yeah. Sometimes get people in communities who maybe not so familiar with GT racing. They just see a racing game and decide to give it a go, complaining about people and blue flags it becomes fairly obvious fairly quickly that they've only ever watched F1 racing, and they don't understand that blue flags don't always mean the same thing.
I mean, while we are now here, letting the timer on getting a bit darker, why not take a look at next week's schedule? Use the time a bit. This is it for week 42. We are getting closer to the end of the year, folks.
Ooh.
Also closer to Christmas. She's melting. If you know what I mean. But, yeah. The next RCE in 2 weeks will be back at Spa-Francorchamps with the Porsche Cup car. And I know some people with nice liveries on that car. So I'm hoping to see them in that very race on those 2 races, rather said. Other than that, we will of course move on to RCL round 4, which we will also introduce a few changes to hopefully resolve some issues we had last week on that race. Especially in qualifying and the driver lineup. Other than that, we will have the feature race being with the Mission R. I know that there are certain people who really love that car. One of them, unfortunately, not being able here today, but winning yesterday's race. Road Atlanta will be featured once more with the GT3X and GT3 Cup cars. And Monza will see a GT3 front-wheel drive combo, which was always, I think, one of the races I really liked.
I think it's a good combo. They're so different, and obviously the front-wheel drive cars are a lot slower than the GT3s. But it's probably a similar kind of speed difference as we have here with the hypercars and the GT3s, to be honest.
Yeah, pretty much comparable to that. But yeah, for the Founders Series, we will go to Daytona with the GT3X in Nordschleife. Since next RFL event in 2 weeks, we'll see the Praga in action. We'll be with the Praga for 2 weeks.
Nice.
And I just see that I made a mistake, of course. The Porsche 911 Cup race will not be today, but on the 26th of November. So thanks to Joachim Thunder for pointing that one out to me. However, yeah, the 911 GT3 Cup will return to the series for the next 2 weeks. And then front-wheel drive series will go on for another week. And GT3 series at Spa and Road Atlanta. So I guess if you've got some practice on Road Atlanta now, might as well go in and use that practice for the schedule. But yeah, back in the race, the sun has settled a bit more, so it's getting darker and darker each minute.
Yeah, we're getting towards 8 o'clock now in game time. So it's starting to get a bit darker. I don't know if I've ever actually seen the hypercars racing at night.
I'm sure we have.
I mean,
I'm actually not sure we have.
I have at Daytona, I think. But there's so many lights at Daytona, it's not as big a deal. But I'm not sure if I have anywhere else.
I've definitely driven then at night. That is for certain. But now that you mentioned, did we have a night race in the hypercars in any RENNSPORT community event? Because the last time we had one was the Daytona, I think.
Yeah.
I just recently looked it up. It wasn't Daytona. It was quite a while back though.
I mean, me and Lena, neither of us have the best memory. So we
Pretty
may
much
well be wrong
goldfish.
here.
So the last one was definitely, yeah, it was Daytona actually, but actually I don't think we had an RCE with night and hypercars.
I'm interested to see if the little number board on the BMW lights up or not.
That it does, that I know.
Awesome. Thanks
I mean,
for
the
ruining the
first
surprise.
no problem. I mean, the first GT3, the first hypercar race we had was at Fuji with the 963 and M Hybrid being released at that point.
Oh, yes.
But it wasn't at night, it was at sundown, I think.
Yeah. It looks very pretty at sundown now.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it will also make that founder's livery of Dominic Ladler look even more beautiful.
We couldn't possibly have a night race without mentioning the founder's livery.
No, we can't. It's impossible. But we are only 15 laps from the end of this race.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to get super dark.
Of course, sunset and sundown being very fitting to RENNSPORT since it all turns orange.
But yeah, I don't think, judging by it, that Ginez is going to need to pit again. I think he's got enough fuel on board to make it to the end of the race. Dominic Ladler, I'm fairly certain he does as well. In fact, I think everyone does now, seeing as Johannes Blum had that accident and had to go into the pits.
Bit surprised that Moore still hasn't turned his headlights on. Talking is hard, I know, but of course you should do that before it gets too dark. Otherwise, you'll get a warning and a penalty.
Yeah, for sure. That does sometimes catch people out though, and they don't realise it's a thing they need to do. I think headlights are on automatic by default, so unless you turn it off, they will come on by themselves when it gets too dark.
Genius is coming into the pits, though, for the last 15 laps.
Yeah, he did have a bunch of spins. He is not taking any. He's not taking any fuel on. He's just changing tires. So he'd maybe decided that the flat spots were just too much for him to handle, and he's got plenty of gaps, so he might as well go in and get them changed.
Got him Thunder throwing in the possibility of the headlights being damaged. But I have to disappoint you. You can tell by the rear lights, by the tail lights, that only the stationary, the running lights are on. And not the low or high beams.
Ginny's got a bit hot coming off the jacks there and had a bit of an interesting, almost hitting the wall moment.
I've usually seen that with the GT3 in him, though.
Yeah. I believe with the hypercars in IMSA racing, they're not allowed to spin the wheels coming out of the pits. I think it's against the rules. To my knowledge,
they're not. I mean, it does make sense, since they have so much power.
Yeah, and there are people.
Yeah. I mean, not that the GT3s really care about that, but...
No.
It's interesting to see how that also changed over the years. I mean, if you think back, especially to the early 2010 DTM years, with the pit stops being done by 4 tire carriers instead of just 2 per rear, per side.
Yeah.
They were like super quick and they instantly did a burnout coming out of the pits, basically carrying the whole pit lane in smog. And nowadays you have the air jacks, they're not allowed to spin before the car's down.
Yeah.
But it's always for good reason, so...
Yeah, for sure.
Just because nothing has happened doesn't mean there could not be something happening at some stage.
If things happen in pit lanes, they tend to be fairly bad, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's better to be preventative rather than reactionary in that sense. The sun setting now and hitting the tarmac and lighting it up. Looking pretty pretty.
I mean, look at that sky. I don't know, in racing games, especially sim racing games, I can always have another eye at it, and in real life I'm just, yeah, well, it's getting darker, cool.
With the amount of fuel he's got on board, I don't think, and without any need to push this late into the race, I don't suppose Ginez is going to particularly try to go any higher up the lap leaderboard right now. Probably not wanting to throw it away 1 hour 25 into a race.
Yeah, probably not. What I also really like about Road Atlanta, I'm not going to talk about the plane story again, but even though you can really see that, I don't want to, no. But like, you have those camping sites just in the infield, they are full of campers, pretty much like the Nordschleife.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm wondering why they don't call it the Petit Nordschleife. Anyway. I'm getting off topic again. But, you know, in the 24-hour Nürburgring race especially, I don't know why, but they feel like it's an obsession to talk about how you smell the barbecue and all the grill stuff in the car while driving. And I mean, I definitely know how much you can smell of the outside world in your car. I mean, you just need to have a 1.9 liter TDI VW in front of you to notice that.
Yeah, true.
But is it extra challenging?
I suppose if you're hungry, it's going to be.
That's a fair point.
Got a weigh on you. I live not very far away from what used to be quite a large food processing factory. And if the wind was blowing the right way, even though we were over a mile away, you can still smell it. And it sometimes influenced our meal plans to be slightly less than healthy, shall we say. So I'm sure if they were in a car and hungry, which they shouldn't be, they should have proper nutrition before they enter the car, then I'm sure it's got to be a little bit distracting. But with less than 10 laps to go now, it's getting towards the end of this race. The sun is starting to set. It's getting a little bit darker. I think we've got some of the street lights on.
Moore also has turned his headlights on. Just the low beams for now, but I guess they're enough.
Yeah, don't want to go crazy.
And we wish great recovery for Dennis Heinz, who's in chat, but unfortunately can't participate today due to illness. I mean, throwing a Dennis Heinz into this race, what would have that been?
Yeah, sometimes real life gets in the way of pretend car racing, and that's fine, it happens. But we do wish everyone could turn up to every race. We're selfish like that.
I mean, he just has to recover in time for the next RCL race to defend the points lead from this man, Dominic Radler. Now trying to put a lap on Moore.
Johannes Bloom does seem to only have one headlight working.
I mean, it's not unlikely to say it like that.
Doesn't seem to be getting a warning for it though, so it seems fine.
Oh wait, Moore getting all out of shape in that small right-hander there. Dominic Radler just sitting in the slipstream of him. He's definitely not taking any risk here. I mean, why shouldn't he?
No, I mean, if you're coming up to lap your nearest competitor, there's no point pushing to try and get past that position.
Moore now also into the pits for a last pit stop. So maybe he's trying to go for a good lap in the end.
Mora had a message up saying pit to repair your car for a while. So, although he doesn't seem to be repairing, he does seem to be refueling and changing tyres. I wonder if his tyres had got too far down. I don't think I've ever seen that message before, though.
Will be a mystery unless he resolves it fast. But Gines, 6 laps to go.
And Johannes Bloom also has a repair your car message. And now seems to have 2 working headlights. Oh.
Indeed so.
Maybe just a little replay graphical glitch going on there.
Gotta say, that shot we had right there from the inside wall, that was absolutely beautiful.
And the WEC lights on the side of the car also lighting up. Now it's getting a little bit darker.
Paconogene is definitely having a not working headlight on the right hand side.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Bloom goes into the pits again.
6 laps to go. 5 laps to go for Ginez now. He's got, I think he's got enough fuel to last him towards the end. You can always turn the regen and deployment up a bit and try and put a bit more of the load onto the electrical system. But obviously he's taken some damage to the front. What I do kind of like is the kind of lights around the air intake scoops at the front of the car. It kind of has obeyed the damage and it only lights up so far around.
I mean, of course, in terms of the feature, it's a very nice one. Because when you're driving, you would rather prefer the whole road to be lit, but...
Well, yeah, I can't imagine the LED strip around the air intakes is particularly a big lighting source.
That's a fair point.
But
that I'm also looking forward to in the real PT limo once it gets dark. Have you seen
all the lights out?
The Mustang GT3 livery?
I haven't, no.
It does light up in the dark, actually. Like the horse on the side is lighting up. And it looks absolutely fantastic. It's basically like our Fauna's livery, just without the animation.
I do like the Mustang GT3. I was a bit disappointed with its implementation in another GT3 simulator, where it's basically just a Frankenstein of a bunch of other cars smashed together. But I do like it. I want the GT4 version as well, though. Please, RENNSPORT.
Make us proud.
Starting to get darker now, but with only a couple of laps to go, it shouldn't affect them too much.
Oh. Talking about not
happened.
affecting too much.
Sorry, that was my fault again.
Stop talking.
Yeah, 9:45 in game, so it's definitely getting darker. You can see the Founder's livery lighting up nicely, showing us just how not dark it is, but how much the light is fading.
Definitely makes you appreciate the light of the day.
Yeah.
In some form.
Can't imagine Dark Road Atlanta is something a lot of these guys have raced, so it will be a bit of a new thing, but with the light fading out slowly, you can kind of adapt from one lap to another and it's not so jarring.
I'm a bit confused by Muro because he has had his lights on, and since he pitted, the lights are off.
Oh.
So let's hope that this won't lead to any further troubles.
He does have the enable headlights message. So he's going to have to do that. Otherwise he will get a black flag, which at this point would be not good. He's surely noticed that it's quite hard to see where he's going.
Oh, same goes for Facundo Ginés, who's gone around in turn 1. Hasn't done so in quite a while, but...
No, he did manage to style it out again, though. He's very good at that.
I don't want to say he got used to it, but in some form he did, maybe.
Johannes Blum has been disqualified, which is a bit disappointing at this stage of the race. I'm sure he's really pleased about that. Black flag due to exceeding incident point limit.
Incident point limit has been at 45.
So that's quite a lot of off tracks.
Very much so. What is happening to Fernandez Moura?
I think he's trying to find out how to turn his headlights on.
But he's also going almost like he's rolling out of fuel or something.
He's still got fuel. He keeps blinking. Oh, now he's found the flasher button. So he's found out how to do that.
I mean, he has only this lap to complete, since Ginés is on his final lap.
Yeah. I know we have heard talk from other people that if you press the flasher button because your headlights are technically on for a second, it resets the penalty. So if he doesn't know where his button for headlights is, he can just keep hitting the flasher.
I wonder if Dominic Lala will wait for Ginés or if he'll just do another lap. Seems like he's just going for another one here.
Yeah, it does look like it. He's not had enough. He wants more.
But
yeah.
Facundo Ginés out of the final turn to win the 200 miles here at Road Atlanta. It has been a fairly dominant race for him, I think.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely say he dominated that one. As far as the hypercar class is concerned, I think Dominic Ladler's been pretty dominant in the GT3s.
I mean, he hasn't been as dominant from the start on, but he definitely was the most consistent out of all of them.
No, I mean, Ginés has led every corner of the race, but you can't get much more dominant than that. But you've got to hand it to Ladler. He ran a good race. He's been consistent. He's managed to keep his concentration up throughout the entire distance.
Moura seems to struggle a bit to where he is going.
I think he's on the menu trying to figure out how to turn his headlights on.
Well, he just has one corner to go, and Dominic Lala comes across the line.
Oh, he came on.
GT3.
Now turn them on more. That's the side lights. Put the full lights on. You're so close.
Just has to go a couple of meters.
I'm wondering if this is his last lap of his penalty and he doesn't want to cross the line until he's got his lights on.
It's definitely a bit of an enigma, I guess.
Come on, Laura. You can figure it out. Cycle those lights. Nope, that's off.
I'm not quite sure if he's switching through them or just toggling the stationary lights.
Yeah, I think he's just toggling the side lights on and off rather than having a key bound to switch between modes.
And now he's going towards the line, flashing with the brakes, but across the line. Goes then on this mirror to finish off the overall ponyman, coming home in second place in class. But yeah, what a race this was. Certainly very interesting. Almost felt like the certain Toyota 2017. With Muro being stationary there before the finish.
It was a bit of a driver versus track race more than a driver versus driver race today. It seemed more about surviving than anything else.
Very much, but 3 people definitely survived, and 2 of them, in the end, can claim victory.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll just put on the schedule, even though it should be fixed now. Just having a quick look, and it does seem right. So yeah, that was today's event. I think it was still quite a lot of fun to commentate with you on it.
Yeah. It's always fun commentating with you, Lino.
I
always
know.
find something to talk about.
Does be. I mean, if Remco's near somebody, has to be a bit big-headed, I guess. Love goes out to Remco Mayor. But yeah, I'm excited to be here next week again for the RCL Nürburgring. We haven't had that in quite a while, so
Nope.
let's hope it will be awesome. And
I'm sure it will be.
It will be. If you want to watch more racing action at Road America, no, not Road Atlanta. It's fairly similar name, but definitely not the same track. In Road Atlanta, make sure to check out the Petit Le Mans. IMSA does live stream it to YouTube in most countries. So we wish you a great evening and good start into the next week, I guess.
Yeah.
And until next time, have a great time and goodbye.
Goodbye.